Smart trainers have exploded in popularity, but with more options available than ever before, how do you know which ones are any good? Well, I've tested nearly all of the latest models, and in this video, I'm going to tell you what I think are the best options at every price point, from the budget through mid-range and right up to the top end. And as always, if you want to read my in-depth reviews and pick apart all the tiny details, then you can head over to BikeRadar.com to check them out after you've watched this video. Now though, let's talk about the budget smart trainers. At the lower end of the market, smart trainers cost around £200 to £400 or dollars. Now, until recently, your options were basically limited to wheel-on models, some of which were okay, but all of which tended to suffer from a lack of stability, increased noise, and relatively poor ride feel. But with the recent launch of the Van Rysel D100, which cost just £260 or €300, we finally have a direct drive option at this end of the market. Luckily, it's also a good one, though it is worth noting it does have a few limitations that mean it isn't suitable for everyone. The biggest one of those is that the D100 has a maximum power output of just 600 watts, which means it won't be able to supply any more resistance to your pedaling past that point. Now, as you might have guessed, this will make sprinting on it almost impossible for a large number of riders. And even I, a 35-year-old dad who weighs 64 to 65 kilos, doesn't train very much and hasn't seen a gym in about 2 decades, can hit 600 watts in a race or an interval session unless I'm absolutely knackered. Now obviously, not every virtual race or group ride ends in a sprint, and most erg mode workouts don't even include them, so this might not be a deal breaker for everyone. But if you are a fairly powerful rider, or even if you just have aspirations to be one, then I think you're better off saving up for a better spec smart trainer, and as we'll talk about shortly, you don't actually have to spend that much more to see a big jump in specs. Now all that said, if that max power output figure isn't an issue for you, then there's otherwise much to like about the Van Rysel D100. The ride feel, for example, is leagues ahead of similarly priced wheel-on smart trainers such as the TaxFlow Smart or Elite Novo. Now, it doesn't have the heaviest flywheel, so the ride feel is slightly choppier than with more expensive direct drive options, but honestly, the difference is small. If you've used a high-end smart trainer with a big hefty flywheel in the past, then you will be able to tell a difference, but if not, then I don't think there's anything to worry about. Likewise, while the cadence data was absolute trash, I was pleasantly surprised by how accurate the power data was. Van Rysel only claims it's accurate to plus or minus 5%, and typically when the potential error band is that wide, I get worried because it tends to mean the brand isn't very confident in its ability to accurately measure power. In my testing though, it generally averaged within 3% of on-bike power meters such as Favero's Asioma Duo pedals and a Quarq D4 Spider once properly calibrated, which isn't too far off the plus or minus 2% or better that most pricier smart trainers promise. Luckily, the cadence errors don't really detract from the overall experience. You can just ride at whatever cadence feels good to you and ignore the numbers you see on screen. Another area where the D100 spec is compromised on paper is with the maximum simulated gradient, which can only go up to 6%. In my experience though, this is much less of an issue in reality, because on Zwift, for example, the default trainer difficulty setting is set to 50%, meaning you actually only feel half of the on-screen gradient at the trainer. Set up like this then, Zwift won't max out the D100's resistance until the in-game gradient reaches 12%. Now of course, you will notice that there's no more resistance coming when you're on steeper virtual gradients, but it's never felt like a major problem to me, you just won't need to change gears as often. The version I tested comes with a Zwift cog single speed adapter and a little Zwift click button for virtual shifting. Now this is cool because it means you can mount almost any bike to it and it will work straight off the bat. But if you don't want it, you can get the D100 without the Zwift cog for about £30 or euros less, but then you'll need to supply your own cassette instead. The only other thing to note is that unfortunately, the Van Rysel D100 is only available in the UK and the EU at the time of writing. So if you live somewhere else, then sadly, you're going to need to consider something else. And in terms of other options around this price, unfortunately, it's mostly wheel-on models. While they're generally not as good as direct drive smart trainers, wheel-on smart trainers such as the TaxFlow Smart, Wahoo Kickr Snap and Elite Novo Smart can offer good performance and are something that I would recommend over a dumb trainer paired with a power meter, for example. The TaxFlow Smart has an RRP of around £300 or $400, though you can typically find it online for less, and it offers decent specs on paper with up to 800 watts of resistance and gradients up to 6%. When I tested it back in 2021, I was pleasantly surprised that it offers decent ride feel and a fairly good experience on apps like Zwift, and while the power measurement wasn't as accurate as with the Van Rysel D100, it was alright. Not amazing, but not so terrible as to be unusable. Here in late 2024 though, I think that most riders would be happier with a direct drive smart trainer in the long run. So if you're shopping on a tight budget but can't get hold of something like the Van Rysel D100, then I actually think your best bet is to save your money, shop around and wait for a deal on a pricier model. Now while I was writing the script for this video around Black Friday for example, you could get an Elite Sweeto for just £275 here in the UK, which was an absolute steal. Now, by the time you're watching this video, you won't be able to get that deal anymore, but in my experience, many slightly older smart trainers are now being discounted fairly frequently. And while it's obviously hard for me to make specific recommendations without knowing what deals are available at any given time, wherever you live, if you do spot something, then it's worth checking out BikeRadar.com first to see whether we've tested it and how it performs. But if you've just got that bit more money to spend though, then your options really do start to open up. Now here in the mid-range, the undisputed champ is the new Jet Black Victory. Priced at just under £400 or dollars or €450, the Victory has class-leading specs, every feature you could ever want, plus great ride feel and accurate data topping it all off. For only £140 more than the Van Rysel D100, the Jet Black Victory can simulate gradients up to 16% and can provide up to 1800 watts of resistance. And in my opinion, that's going to be more than enough for anyone who isn't a world-class sprinter. The ride feel is also excellent thanks to its heavier 4.7 kilo flywheel, and the power data accuracy was also fantastic. I occasionally saw it read a tiny bit low at the start of rides, but as it has automatic calibration, this always sorted itself out within about 10 minutes of riding. Beyond that, it also has Wi-Fi connectivity, which gives you a stronger, potentially more stable connection than with Bluetooth or ANT+, and it even has race mode. This basically means that it can send and receive data packets to and from the smart device it's connected to at a much faster rate, giving you a more responsive feel in whatever app you're using. Now, as the name suggests, this is particularly useful in virtual races, where having a more responsive system means there's less lag between your input at the pedals and what happens on screen. It's also worth noting that both Wi-Fi and race mode are features that even some super expensive high-end smart trainers don't have. I'm looking at UTACs. So to see them here on a £400 smart trainer is absolutely amazing, and I hope this makes other brands sit up and take notice. I also appreciate the inclusion of a little carrying handle, which just makes it that little bit easier to carry around, and it means you don't risk getting your fingers trapped somewhere they shouldn't. For me then, the Jet Black Victory is the clear category leader at this price point, but what if you can't get hold of one? In that case, I actually think there are plenty more great options. There's nothing that has the full feature set that the Victory has, especially not at that price, but options we previously reviewed such as the Wahoo Kickr Core, Elite Sweeto, Elite Directo XR and the Saris H3 are all great trainers and can generally be had at decent prices. For just under £450 or $500 for example, the Wahoo Kickr Core is a great alternative to the Jet Black, and while it lacks Wi-Fi and race mode, it does tick basically every other box and is a proven platform from a well-established brand. Likewise, the Elite Directo XR that I still use for testing power meters have come down a lot in price since it launched in 2021, and while the plasticky build quality means it doesn't feel as solid as some other trainers, I've been using one for nearly 4 years now and it's never given me any trouble whatsoever. If you've got a really sizable budget to spend on a smart trainer, then of course you are going to have a lot of great options to choose from. Before we talk about specific models, I do think we should just pause for a second and think about whether many of us really need a high-end smart trainer. For the most part, all you're getting for the extra money is a slightly better ride quality and likely higher maximum power and simulated gradient specs. And really, how many of us need more than 1800 watts of resistance? If Robert Forsterman is watching this and thinking, "Mich," well, fair enough, and thanks for watching, Robert. The rest of us though can probably get everything we need at the mid-range level that I just talked about. It's basically like the difference between Ultegra and Dura-Ace. Sure, Dura-Ace is shinier and a little lighter, but in reality, 99% of us will get by perfectly fine with Ultegra. Now, All that said, if you do want a high-end smart trainer, then I think that the best option currently available is Wahoo's Kickr V6. It is a couple of years old now, but it's got every feature you'd want, including Wi-Fi, race mode, and so on. It's also got a really substantial 7.3 kilogram flywheel that generates lots of inertia and makes the ride feel very good. In terms of fluidity through the pedals, it's not a night and day difference compared to something like the Kickr Core or the Jet Black Victory, but that extra stability of the wider three-leg design and the much heavier overall weight of just under 22 kilos does mean that it's super stable underneath you when cranking out big numbers.
Go on, Simon.
Now, for someone who's as light as me, that doesn't make a huge difference, but if you're a bigger, more powerful rider, then you'll likely appreciate a trainer with a little bit more ballast like this. In terms of other options around this price, the Elite Justo 2 is a strong contender on paper with almost identical specs. However, given the Kickr V6 is around £200 cheaper, it's still the obvious choice for me at this level. The other big contender at this end of the market is the Tacx Neo 3M, but unfortunately we ran out of time to get that one tested before making this video, so you have to look out for my review of that trainer on BikeRadar.com later down the line. On paper though, it is incredibly expensive, just under £1,750 or $2,000 or euros, and it doesn't seem to offer anything meaningful over the likes of Wahoo's Kickr V6 or the Elite Justo. In fact, as I alluded to earlier, it's even missing some key features such as Wi-Fi connectivity and race mode, which is a little bit astonishing for a trainer that costs that much. Given how good its predecessor, the Neo 2T, was, I expect the Neo 3M is an excellent smart trainer, but it's really hard to see why you'd spend double what the Wahoo Kickr V6 costs for a trainer that, on paper at least, doesn't really offer anything more. Well, there you have it. Those are my recommendations for the best smart trainer at every budget. As mentioned earlier, you can check out my in-depth reviews for all of these trainers and plenty more at BikeRadar.com, and if there are any other trainers that you'd like me to test, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed it, and if you did like this video, why not watch this one where Liam and I discuss a major competitor for Zwift.